became immediately overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. It was beautiful. And so I said, well, what do I do? How do I solve this problem? So I started implementing AI into my workflow, and I was able to increase efficiency by about 90%. And I said, holy crap, this is insane. And so I started training my team. I started onboarding new team members with this technology. And up to this day, it's dramatically reduced the costs in my business. And I was hooked, I am hooked, and I'm here. And I'm excited to talk about it.
Szabo, I'm Vice President General Counsel of NetChoice. I want to thank everyone for being here. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our esteemed moderator, Dan Grech. He told me it's like Grech. He is a Pulitzer Prize journalist and founder of BizHack, as you can see his shirt, which is a company that trains small business in AI tools. BizHack Academy.
Great, thank you. So guys, one of the things is I have a background in public radio, and I like running these a little bit more like a call-in show. So rather than waiting for the Q&A at the end, if you have any questions as we're talking, just raise your hand, grab my attention, and I'll fold you into the conversation as we go. We're going to start by way of introductions to ask each of the panelists about their AI moment. This is a moment when you were interacting with a large language model, a ChatGPT, and your jaw dropped, and you couldn't believe what you were seeing, and you knew with certainty at that moment that there was a before and an after in your life and in human history. So I'll start actually with Tahl Milburn, who's a gentleman technologist, thoughtful investor, executive advisor, startup mentor, and seed funder. What was your AI moment?
So this was maybe I've been exposed to AI for 20 years, but my moment would be about, I would say 5 years ago. And I was at the time talking to a bunch of vendors by email. And I was trying to get a meeting scheduled with a vendor. And I was dealing with this guy's admin, and we kept going back and forth. You know, he was going to be on vacation, and then I talked about, my schedule. We went back and forth. And then I found out that the admin was a bot. And I literally got goosebumps that I had been conversing with this person. We were talking about vacations and, kids and all this stuff, and it was in person. And I just went, whoa, okay. That was my moment.
I love it. Next is Mark Savant of Savant Media and Podcast Productions. What was your AI moment?
So about a year and a half ago, I had the common problem of losing a key employee. Key employee left the company. And I did what most business owners do, and I did all the work and became immediately overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. It was beautiful. And so I said, well, what do I do? How do I solve this problem? So I started implementing AI into my workflow, and I was able to increase efficiency by about 90%. And I said, holy crap, this is insane. And so I started training my team. I started onboarding new team members with this technology. And up to this day, it's dramatically reduced the costs in my business. And I was hooked, I am hooked, and I'm here. And I'm excited to talk about it.
I love it. What was the one use case that was the most efficient, that saved you the most time that you figured out?
Copywriting. It's unbelievable. I was able to turn long-form video, long-form audio into eloquently written words. And I think what most people don't understand is that we're not living in I'm competing against my neighbor in my city or my county or even my country, because historically it's very difficult to write in English. But now a 20-year-old Malaysian kid using AI can write like an incredible author, and the world is forever changed.
So thank you. So Kalista Zackhariyas is the founder and CEO of Spark Seeker. What was your AI moment, Kalista?
Well, I want to say, we're a startup in South Florida. We've been building our tech platform. We've been working in some solutions in this area. But the one moment where I realized that it was not just something that was an idea, this is something we had to do, was when a friend of mine called me and said, this is in the early days of generative AI, and said, they were not a politician, they were not anybody famous, they were just a person in a company. She was in PR. She called me and she said, we have a situation. Somebody's taken an image of our CEO and a clip of his voice, and there's something out there that says he did something that he didn't do. He said something he didn't say, and it's a major reputation crisis moment. And that was the day I realized, holy crap, like this is not a PR bonus anymore. It's a PR must. And like the world as we know it has changed, because anybody could get framed for saying, for having said something that they didn't. And wherever there's divide, there's going to be further divide. And it's like something's got to change.
We're going to be talking, as you guys know, about AI ethics and some of the challenges, and I imagine deepfakes and that kind of thing. And the upcoming presidential election is going to be, use case number one of that. All right. Carl Szabo, Vice President General Counsel of NetChoice, what was your AI?
So my boss comes back, this is about a year ago, and he's talking about this chat GPT thing. I think he's like, this is the new thing. I'm like, okay, whatever. And it was Mother's Day this past year. And like a good husband, good father, I have nothing for my wife. And I'm freaking out. It is Mother's Day. I've missed it once before. It ended badly. Don't do it, guys. So I was like, what can I do to get her something really nice? And I actually turned, don't tell her that I did this. I actually turned to generative AI. My wife is X years old. She's a mother of two. She's amazing. She goes to the house party. Write me a funny Mother's Day card. And it did it. It was awesome. And then I was able to use generative AI to create her as like a superhero with like two kids flying through the supermarket or something. And she loved it. And for me, that's when I realized this will be an incredible productivity tool. But simultaneously, in day-to-day life, it will fundamentally make our lives better and easier. And for all the people out there, we got Thanksgiving coming up, you got Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever. We can finally write somewhat seemingly personalized messages to our loved ones or to that in-law you don't want to talk to. And that's kind of the power that I think is going to get unleashed. We can finally begin communicating with people who we otherwise would have just sent a Hallmark card to.
I love it. What's so beautiful about that example is when we teach AI in our academy, we always start with a personal use case because it's much less intimidating and it can be beautiful. Like I tell generative AI bedtime stories with my 4-year-old, and the neighbor's dog was leaving. So the neighbors were leaving and they had a dog named Wally, and so Wally wrote a goodbye letter to my kids in the dog words in the language of a dog, and it's incredibly. There's a lot of fear, and we're going to get into the fear. Some of it's well founded. There's a lot of fear out there about using these tools. There's a lot of negative press around it. Fear of humankind being basically annihilated by robots. And when you actually use this tool in a more familiar way, I was in Spain and my daughter lost her tooth, and so I had the tooth fairy write a letter to my daughter, but in Spanish, of course, because it's a Spanish tooth fairy. So that kind of thing. It makes the technology far more approachable. All right, so let's get into it. I want to start with the challenges around AI ethics, and Kalista, I'd like to start with you. What is for you the most pressing ethical challenge related to AI?
AI is garbage in, garbage out. Your output is as good as the quality of input. So I don't really fault AI per se as a whole. What I think the challenges with AI are going to be is that everybody seems to be jumping on the AI bandwagon very quickly. Every organization wants to implement some kind of a language learning model, an LLM, or some kind of an AI tool. And while AI has amazing capabilities, to benefit our lives, I think right now with the amount of exploitive data practices that are out there, especially from like social networks, the amount of data that there is, human data that's available out there, the inherent biases, as well as when we start switching into more digital scoring systems, how that's going to impact how we're rated, how that's going to feed into different models, how it's going to impact marginalized communities. I think these are the areas in which we really need to start looking at how, at the shadow sides, I call it, the shadow world of AI. Not to say that there aren't some amazing things, but this is definitely one of the implications.
Yeah, and when you say garbage in, garbage out, can you explain what you mean by that?
Absolutely. Like you've got let's take the example of a college student. All right. A college student will go onto ChatGPT and say, write me a paper about this. And it will output a phenomenally written paper. Has it been fact checked? No. Is it good quality data in there? We don't know. So it's not about getting something to write a paper for us, but if you can feed that model and say, hey, act as an expert in this field, you feed it valid data, you feed it real fact-checked information. That way the student is still learning all the information. And then you're asking that the ChatGPT output based on your input. Now you've got something crafted that you have fact-checked, that is accurate, and maybe it supported you, but in that process, you've still learned. So I think that's what I mean by garbage in, garbage out, because the output is as good, the quality of output can only be as good as the quality of input. So the data sets you feed it, the kind of biases that are going to be, there, have you checked for that? The misinformation, disinformation inherent in it, have you checked for that? So you really want to make sure that the data you're feeding it is good, clean, and accurate, and it's in line with the output you want.
There's another problem here to it. Has everyone played the game Telephone, where you get a group of people and you just toss a message through the group, and by the time it gets back to you, the message is completely changed? Every day, there's more and more AI content being put onto the internet. Blogs, social media, emails. It's being flooded and flooded with AI content. And so as AI ChatGPT, for example, just upped its AI portfolio, we can browse the web up to, I want to say, April of 2023. As they keep boosting this up, you're going to have AI leveraging information from AI that was developed by AI. And then all of a sudden, we have no idea what we're actually getting. So the garbage in, garbage out is going to be exponentially developed by this issue.
I mean, we had that problem. Like, we solved for that problem on the web initially. That's what Google did, right? It used to be we would rank you in a search algorithm based on a keyword and the number of times it shows up in your web page. So what did people do? Where I'm old, you'd go into your HTML code and you'd throw a bunch of junk in there so that you get extra high ranked on SEO back when Yahoo and Ask Jeeves and AltaVista were doing it. And that worked kind of, but then people started to cheat the system, kind of like the AI scenario you're talking about. But then Google came up with a way to actually realize, let's get rid of the crap. And how they do it, it was how many times you got linked to. They decided that was a better metric. How reliable, how much are people looking at your stuff and using it, linking to it. And that's how they increased the rankings, because that was the exact same problem. Nobody could discern between the garbage and the good. And we did figure that out. So what I think is probably going to happen is somebody's going to create an algorithm with AI, and we do rank when we get a good or bad result, right? Granted, I don't know anybody who actually does the thumb up or thumb down that much. But somebody's going to be able to figure out a way to begin filtering out the junk, because we can detect AI generated content, even if it's red. And maybe we want more of that, maybe we want less. And so I think I'm the eternal techno-optimist on the panel, so sorry about that.
Yeah. I'd love to hear Tahl. Tahl, you've been involved in the folks who are building these technologies. You were one of the early testers of ChatGPT 3.5. One of the garbage in, garbage out challenges, which is more of a feature than a bug, is the fact that most of what this is being trained on, right, has certain biases inherent in it. The internet is biased towards wealthy countries because wealthy countries tend to produce more content than poorer countries. Most of the people who are producing that content are men, and they're white men from rich European or US countries. And so you see this very clearly in facial recognition, where facial recognition tends to be much worse at recognizing darker skinned faces. So I'd love to hear from a technological perspective, to what extent is garbage in a feature versus a bug?
I have a different perspective on bias than some other people do. I think that sometimes AI is attributed to being biased when really it is a reflection of society. It is a large language model that's been trained on the internet. Okay, so the good, the bad, and the ugly. We all know that there's good, the bad, and the ugly on the internet. And so in much the same way that I can ask an expert who has a PhD in, computer science a question, and she gives me an answer, I can ask AI and it give me an answer, but we have a tendency to blame the AI as being biased, that PhD, this was from the previous session. We don't think that expert is biased. So really, it's more of a human problem, not an AI problem. So the AI is simply trained on it. So what OpenAI did is they put in a moderation layer, okay, to filter out humanity in some ways. So there are certain things that you cannot express because it will reject it, okay? And they call that safety guidelines, and they have a moderation layer. Now, there's a whole group of people who are trying to break the moderation layer. That's called jailbreaking. Okay, so, but it is a layer that's been put on what is a representation of humanity. So I don't think that AI is inherently more biased than humans are. We all are humans. If I say, I'd like to get a picture, go to Chat GPT and say, give me a picture of a energetic child. Most of the time, it will give you a boy. Now,
A white boy.
It will give you a white boy. Now, is what should it do? That's what we have to kind of decide as a society. But our language, for most people, if you say, draw me a picture of a energetic child, that would be the default. So I think we have to talk amongst ourselves, and this goes with ethics too, which we haven't gotten into, but really, we have to answer that as humans and then let our AI represent that humanity.
Yeah, hang on one sec. I'd like to actually hear your perspective on what is the biggest ethical challenge on AI.
The biggest ethical challenge on AI, well, the thing that concerns me the most is disinformation. That I'm not so much concerned about the information coming in because it's a large language model and you're basically, it's how it's being used. It can be used in a very convincing way.
Could you define disinformation, just for those who don't?
Okay, so there's disinformation and misinformation. So disinformation is purposely providing information that is not true.
So the difference between misinformation and disinformation is intention.
Is intention.
Yeah, so these are people using AI tools to intentionally mislead.
Yeah, and the danger here is that because it can compose some very convincing prose or a news story or anything else at volume, it can, if it was used as a propaganda tool, it can generate, every headline of every newspaper of a particular country with no one doing anything but pushing a button. And in fact, it's being used. For example, you have a lot of the so-called influencers talking about product marketing is all generative AI, both in terms of the images and all the messages they're saying. And it's it's given a prompt to orient it in one way or another. So it's the prompt that could be the garbage in. That was what's going to create the misinformation. But the scary part is it can do it at volume. I can have one person that could have 50 bots running 24/7 producing a lot of content.
You're never going to stop bad people from doing bad things. That's in our nature, right? But we do have laws on the books. Look, your example of fake influencers. That would be deception. That would be fraud. State AG can bring that case. Federal government can bring that case.
There's a couple of problems with that. Number one is that most of the state AGs are completely overwhelmed. So they will not go to that case unless it was really heinous. I mean, it'd have to be pretty bad. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that it can learn how to get around the regulations. The regulations are going to be specific that you cannot misstate, a statute, blah, blah, blah. It can read all the regulations and then work around those regulations. If it can comprehend the entire book of laws much better than you can, at least faster than you can,
Mark?
and work around them.
Well, and the laws are different in different countries, right? This AI and the internet is as every country. And just to be specific, give a specific example of how this could spark something like a World War III type scenario. Just recently in the Israel-Palestine conflict, there was an image that was released of a burnt baby. Horrible image. Very, very, very terrible. And it was claimed that it was not actually a real photo. It was AI generated. And there's a tool that you can use to determine something's AI generated. Sometimes it said it was AI generated. Sometimes it said it wasn't. But now you've got a situation where you could have bad actors anywhere in the world releasing images that look credible, that look real, and could spark a news cycle that's incredibly dangerous.
And the opposite is true as well. And then, Kalista, the more common use of disinformation in the Hamas-Israeli conflict is people discrediting real information as AI generated. So right now, AI is not that sophisticated, but what it has done is the fact of AI has eroded people's trust and belief in the truth. And so I'm a former journalist. One of the roles of journalists now are to say, no, that actually is a real video, or that's a real photo. It's just getting fuzzy. And no matter who the presidential candidates are, in a year from now, we are going to be experiencing this, I think, in a big way in the United States.
Yeah, I think that, just to back up what Mark was saying, there's the EU rules versus the executive order that just came out from Biden and the US guidelines. The EU takes a very legislative approach, whereas we have a suggested framework right now. I think that one of the things that in order for us to really start being able to safeguard this and safeguard democracy, safeguard systemic divide or protect that, and the disinformation and misinformation is really, and I was talking to you guys about this earlier, is creating an ethical framework and an explainability model prior to creating AI within our organization and really having individual organizations that are using AI. And in fact, social media should be doing this because it's one of the biggest culprits. And we're doing this right now. We're implementing.
Can you explain what explainability means?
Yes, explainable AI is really like when you are, and there's some leading minds, Blackburn is one of them, Reed Blackburn and Javier Viana. If you guys are interested in learning more about that, definitely two great resources for you to take a look at. But their explainable AI is really about creating the framework that says, how did this AI come up with this, and being able to explain what route it took to get there. So it's quite self-explanatory. It's explaining how AI came up with a certain result.
This sounds obvious, but AI right now is a black box.
It is.
We don't really understand how it came up. For instance, ChatGPT learned 95 natural languages. It was not trained on them, and its creators don't know how it learned those languages.
So I think the biggest thing, just to close off on that, is social media platforms, and we're doing this at SparkSeeker right now with our platform, is really integrating AI detection to be able to say, hey, this is AI generated content, either flagging it for review or at least tagging it as, AI generated content. I think would do a lot in just letting people know, hey, this may or may not be real. That creating that doubt will actually be the first step. And I think we need to start looking at solutions like this at an organization by organization level, because the US right now only has a suggestive approach, not a legislative approach.
One of the things that I would recommend is we've got to be able to start training people, starting at children all the way up, to discern facts from non-facts. Over the last few years, I've been amazed about the number of misfacts that float around that millions of people believe, in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. I mean, it's just endemic. And so we don't even need very sophisticated tools. Right now, there's this information in front of us every single day that's obvious to a lot of people, and for other people, they simply believe it because of the community that they're a part of, or because of the way it's represented, or et cetera, et cetera. So we have to do it from both ends, from the AI end, what AI produces, but also the receiving end, how to be able to discern facts from non-facts. We've got to start training people to not believe everything they see and hear.
This is sometimes called media literacy. And there's actually a great course in media literacy from the Poynter Institute, which is a journalism organization. And here's a little tip around how to detect a falsehood. I have a journalism background. If a fact makes you feel a strong emotion, it may well not be true. Because facts don't generally elicit strong emotions. Facts are just facts. But facts that are intended to be disinforming tend to generate a lot of strong emotions. Carl?
So, a lot to unpack. One of the things you brought up I thought was really astute. At NetChoice, we're kind of pushing industry self-reg type approaches. And when it comes to AI, focusing on three things: transparency, accountability, and security. Transparency gets to when you're using AI, tell people you're using AI, or when you're talking to an AI administrator trying to schedule a lunch that they physically can't make, let you know. Accountability, every existing law applies to AI like it does everything else. I think that's pretty clear. I've got people on the other side of the political spectrum from me who are saying the same thing. I think we can agree on that. And then security gets into the keeping data safe and secure, don't retrain on sensitive information, stuff like that. So I think at an industry level, we can do that. The executive order that came out from the White House, I know we've been talking a lot about innovation. There's a lot of effort to seize control or tamp down on that from DC. So I flew in from DC this morning. Boy, are my arms tired. Don't hold that against me. But DC has not met a regulation it does not love. And to that extent, right now at the Federal Trade Commission, they are taking extreme steps to make sure that acquisitions are costly, if not impossible. They're clamping it down. So if you're looking to off-ramp or get out or transition your business, that's going to get a lot harder. On the Biden executive order, they are quote-unquote guidelines, but they've actually been transmuted into agency rulemakings. And there's a whole I've got a ridiculously long spreadsheet of all the agencies involved, all the dates that are deadline, where they need to come up with rules to regulate AI, generative AI. And some of us may think, okay, good, government getting involved. Some of us think that's really terrifying because that is seizing control of avenues of communication. And it may be for noble purposes, but at the end of the day, that's really scary if you want to have free expression, free exchange, and free innovation, which is a core value here. The last thing that I'll note is there is a stopgap. Unfortunately, the stopgap on, quote, disinformation or misinformation is kind of broken. And that is legacy journalism. I think there's a fundamental break in legacy journalism. I don't care if you're left, right, or center. You're probably looking at least one newspaper, one news show that you're like, that's not news, that's not real, that's just propaganda. And an example from the recent war, and this was not AI generated. New York Times, front page, the Jews blew up the hospital. Completely debunked. There are members of Congress right now saying that that's still true. There are plenty of people who still think the earth is flat.
This was my point. Like, how do you train kids to determine what's real and what's not? Nobody knows what the hell is real anymore.
But that's where we need the reputable gumshoe journalism of the words of Bernstein's. Of the, guess what? It's hard work. Go out, verify 2, 3, 4 sources before you run the article. And I think a lot of that has fallen by the wayside in the urge to get the clicks.
And I want to build on this idea and go back to AI ethics and AI challenges. So AI is trained, these large language models are trained on large amounts of data, and the better the data, the better the quality of it, the better the output. One of the big training is journalistic articles. So the entire archive of the New York Times, for instance. Now, from a copyright perspective, generative AI is brand new, never been put forth before. It is safe from copyright concerns. But from like a logical perspective, if you're getting trained on the entire, opus of the New York Times, which they spend untold amounts of money and effort to put together, shouldn't you have to license that, even if it's a generative AI product? The copyright law says no, but the New York Times says yes. And so a lot of media organizations are right now gearing up to sue OpenAI and Google because they feel like there needs to be a licensing for the training of generative AI. This copyright issue has a very big legal and ethical, and I'd love to get some of your guys' thoughts on it.
Actually, I'd love to speak to that. There was an interesting case. There's the case where Drake, he was impersonated. Deepfake Drake. And then there's the same case where Grimes was also faked. Grimes took one approach. She said, go for it, knock yourself out, but I want part of the cut. And Drake said, hell no, I'll see you in court. So they were these two artists, have both very well acclaimed, well known, and their music's in demand. And one chose to go about it one way, the other chose to go about the other. I think that here's the situation where I think that artist should be given some autonomy in how they want to control their career. I think that really where intellectual property comes to play is if you're using the works of anybody else before, I think that has to be credited. And I think that that's where it's lacking. The conversation shouldn't be black or white. I think that anything that doesn't have tolerance or anything that doesn't have conversation or something where we can achieve a middle ground, I think that's when you're going to have extreme opposing sides, and there's going to be a divide and a lot of polarization. So I think that the conversations should be opened up where these artists can have some intellectual property rights around it, especially if their image, likeness, voice, things like that are used. But at the same time, should they choose not to go down that route, that there is enough, I guess, legislative or some kind of stops in place to prevent that from happening.
I think what we're going to have to do is create some rules. Like, for example, a musician can sample another musician's music and put it in their music. And there are some rules that if it's beyond a certain amount, that is a violation. And if it's less than that, it's okay. I think that the horse is out of the barn, to use a cliche, in terms of being able to, there's a lot of material that is potentially copyrighted on the internet, and it's looked at the entire internet, and there is just no way you're going to be able to figure out what is what. I think there's going to have to be rules in terms of use. So if it's accessible by a human, then it should be accessible by a bot. You could have that argument. Okay, free reign, but you can't claim it as something else. Right now I can do generative AI in the style of Picasso. Okay, should I give the estate of Picasso royalty if it's in the style of? That's one of those debatable things. I think it's going to be difficult to enforce, and I think the first couple of lawsuits are going to establish precedent.
I agree with what you're saying, but if you're saying it's made in the likeness of Picasso or in the style genre of Picasso, it's one thing. But when you are taking the face and voice,
I agree,
and all of that, that becomes a different conversation, because now it is not the likeness, it is an impersonation of that person.
So Spotify,
but we need a legal definition of what is impersonation versus what is a likeness.
Agreed.
So Spotify, some of you may be aware, has released Dax Shepard's podcast in Spanish with his voice, generative AI created. That's with his blessing. What it's more complicated is, could you do that without his blessing? And then could you go and monetize it? Well, that's really a complicated question, because the answer right now, copyright-wise, is yes.
Well, and who's held liable for it? Is it the entity, the person that copied that voice or copied that likeness, or is it the distribution platform itself? Because how are you going to hold into account, how are you going to hold liable a 16-year-old Russian kid for creating this fake image or this fake, audio recording? So I think that's something.
Let me just give you, please.
Yeah, just
So there are big logistical challenges beyond ethical and legal ones.
Once upon a time, I did copyright enforcement for the Motion Picture Association and Entertainment Software Association. So there is a bit to unpack. I will start with the premise. Existing copyright law is sufficient. I'll give you 3 examples. First goes to what you were referring to, the corpus. And there's a famous case with Vanilla Ice. If you ever listen to the song Ice Ice Baby, it goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But simultaneously, there's a more famous song, arguably, called Under Pressure by David Bowie. That goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Courts looked at it, and they were so substantially similar, nearly identical, although Vanilla Ice said it's totally different, that David Bowie won in court on copyright for violation of David Bowie's copyright to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So we've dealt with the selection of what is a corpus before. It just happened recently with Ed Sheeran. Then you get into the question of, is the content that is created copyrighted? And if so, by who holds a copyright in it? And the courts have dealt with that as well. There was a famous, what's called the monkey selfie image, where a monkey literally grabbed somebody's phone, took a picture of themselves, looked amazing, and the person who owned the phone, the zookeeper, tried to claim copyright in. The court said, no, the Copyright Office said, no, it must be created by a human. So everything that comes out of ChatGPT, in and of itself, is probably not subject to copyright. Now, if you change it, then you can claim copyright. The last one that I'll give you an example of more recently at the U.S. Supreme Court was Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol had the famous photograph of Prince. And the court said, and that kind of gets into your likeness as well, although it's more copyright than name, image, likeness rights. That gets into the question of, was it a derivative use? And that's ultimately what's at stake. So the Sarah Silverman case right now that's going on, that's a more famous example. And if you go through the claim, you go through the case, she is saying, because, I'm going to pick on Facebook, because Facebook's llama might have looked at something I've written, therefore I have a copyright on everything it generates. Maybe that sounds logical on its face, and then you start to peel back the layers. That is like saying, I went to Rice University, and I listened to my professors occasionally, and I read the books, never. But if I had, then they should have a copyright in perpetuity over everything that I've created, because maybe something I saw there or learned is created. So that's what she's claiming, and that doesn't make sense. So I think the good news is copyright law will figure it out. When it comes to the name, image, likeness stuff, we do have false impersonation rights and stuff like that. It's copyright adjacent,
Yeah.
But to the point where you are taking somebody and claiming it is you or using their image for something that they did not support, that's pretty clear.
I think that's where I think a lot of these platforms need to really sit back and think, because right now, if you go onto any kind of a social platform, why are some of these celebrities verified? What's the true reason for that verification badge? It is to authenticate someone that this is the real person, and it's to prevent imposters. So I do believe that a lot of these platforms, especially like generative AI platforms, do need to, if someone is uploading or inputting a Drake or a Lady Gaga and their image and their likeness, there needs to be some checks and balances in place that actually says, is this coming in from a verified source? You know, something as simple as that. And that's why I think the accountability and the liability should be on the platforms that enable this kind of behavior. Because if we had created those checks and balances in place when we're uploading a famous verified person, we could prevent a lot of this and say, hey, do you have consent for this?
I was just going to throw in, you know, there's some technical challenges here. The one that's being floated now, or the watermarking, is embedding some information in the image so that it can be detected as being AI generated. But there's some problems with that. But
Yeah.
That's a start.
I'm going to invite each of you. So we were going to spend half the time talking about the challenges and half the time talking about the opportunities, and I'm getting the 2 minutes left warning. We haven't even gotten to the opportunities. So I'm going to ask each of you, what is the biggest opportunity in AI ethics? But I wanted to just make one quick point. Generative AI is an existential risk to journalism organizations. Why? So with Google News right now, you go to Google News and it sends you to the website of the news source, and they monetize that traffic. Generative AI will go to the website, it will ingest that information, and then it will summarize the article, sometimes that and other articles, and it will give you the news right there on the ChatGPT or Google Bard interface. And the news organization will not get any of the traffic and therefore any of the revenue. Now, at first, it's very good for the user, but over time, how is that media organization going to be able to continue to have the resources to gather that original news, which is ultimately a human-to-human endeavor? No AI can gather news from another human being, because most journalism is human-sourced. So there is a really big ethical as well as legal challenge here, because we will be a much poorer place if these more media organizations shut down. So that is the challenges. So we'll start with you, Tahl. What is an AI ethics opportunity, whether it's a business opportunity or a societal one?
One of the things about AI over the next 10 to 15 years will be an overwhelming change in society, to my mind. A lot of people are afraid of the AI overlords. I think the bigger challenge is that we will become codependent with AI, our AIs. It will be the source of music that we listen to. It will be the source of art that we look at. It will be what we read. It will be surrounding us. It'll be our friend. Go to replica.com. There are 1 million people at any given moment that are conversing with their AI friend or lover, including an avatar. So that is both a challenge for the lonely, for example, in the case of Replica, but it's also a dilemma. It will, it's a challenge. And we as a society haven't really thought about it, and we may be a little late for us to start thinking about these fundamental things. I mean, social came upon us, and we didn't really think through it because we didn't know what was going to happen. So I think it will be around us, in us, and everything, which is both an opportunity and a challenge, depending on, we become the active curators of our life experience, or it happens to us.
That replica thing is legit. Within 10 years, half of this room is probably going to be dating a robot. Just so you know. Just 10 years, half.
Happily.
Oh, forget about it. But it's going to be a perfect 10. It's going to tell you everything you want. Within 10 years, that's going to happen. No doubt. As far as the greatest opportunity from an ethics standpoint, it's developing your own AI chat bots to engage with potential customers, prospects, to answer FAQs at scale. ChatGPT just released the ability for you to make your own chat bots just this week. And it is silly simple to create. So I think that is the greatest opportunity you can start to capture right now is leveraging this technology to create chatbots to better engage with your staff, your team, your friends, your family, and clients.
Yeah, these are called GPTs, and there's been a lot of news about them.
From an ethics standpoint, let's look at the product side of it. I think there's a lot of opportunity right now with AI for, predictions. AI can be used to predict famines well ahead of its time. I think even therapeutic things, like so many nations out there, so many people out there do not have access to mental health. Things aren't covered by the AI that don't have the medical for it or doesn't support it. AI can be a great tool for therapeutic purposes. So I think there's a ton of opportunity there. In terms of the ethics space, I really do believe that every single organization that is looking to deploy AI, pause for a second, because I think sometimes you need to slow down to speed up. Not saying put the brakes on AI and get left behind, but there is a huge ethics opportunity here where if you can build out the ethical framework and create an explainability framework, you might be a little bit slower to the game, but your output is going to create some really great insight into the gaps in how you're delivering your services to your communities. And that explainability, by implementing that, is not only going to make your business a lot more ethical, your AI output's a lot more valuable, and is also going to help you identify some serious gaps in your business and how you can better serve your people. So I think that's a huge opportunity in the ethics.
Yeah, I actually have an op-ed coming out imminently entitled "Don't Try to Stop the AI Train, Just Mind the Gaps." and it's with respect to the legislation on laws, but that's exactly right. Where I am really optimistic is in education. I've long believed that education is that thing that can lift us all up, and unfortunately, there are too many kids that get left behind. And sometimes a lot of that is this one-size-fits-all educational system we have today. It's great. It works for me. It works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. And so what we're seeing is kind of that personalized, customized tutoring that most of us can't afford. Most of us can't afford. So I'm going to pick on little Jimmy because he's a good prototype. There you go. That's the name I go to, little Jimmy. Little Jimmy is doing great in some parts of math, but stinks at others. Couldn't we get him a tutor? Tutors are really expensive where you can't find them. Now we can get him not only somebody who can teach him, but somebody who can teach him in the way that Jimmy will learn. And that's where I see the opportunities. We can bring a lot of kids, teens, young adults out of this learning wasteland and really uplift them at almost negligible or no cost. So that's the real revolutionary. That's the real equalizer I see going forward.
There's an application called Khanigo, which is Khan Academy's AI-powered instructor. And I run a teaching academy, and I've never found a more powerful teaching tool than AI. And so I love all of what you guys said. One of the things I wanted to share is for disadvantaged communities, for communities of color, for women, one of the huge opportunities from an ethical perspective is to create more sensitized chatbots that serve those populations, because the big LLMs aren't going to do it. And so there's a huge business opportunity in there, and also an ethical one where you can serve those populations. And especially here in South Florida, we're very well positioned to do that. I think another huge opportunity is going to be in really leveraging these technologies to for mental health. There's an incredible startup called Avatar Buddy here in South Florida, which specifically is designed for mental health for children, and it's trained to be very positive and to provide positive reinforcement. The replica mental health, it's definitely got a creepy aspect to it, but what about all those seniors who are so isolated and alone? You know, so it does have an incredible ability to combat the mental health challenges we have in our country.
There's good news and bad news with that, because clearly when you can go into replica and you can get a 10, what you consider to be a 10, right, in terms of looks, and a perfect personality that loves you no matter what, and so forth and so on, it can be misleading. And so now you go into the real world, and you know,
I completely agree with that. I mean,
you're not
what's the difference
completely
between
perfect.
that and all these filters? Like, if you look at all these platforms that are using all these filters, you go then look at that person in the real world, and the real world is not nearly as appealing.
But on the other hand, it does serve a need. So if there anything we need to do with education is not necessarily to get rote knowledge, because the AIs will be doing that for us.
Yeah.
It's to learn, how to discern good from bad, fact from myth, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need a different kind of a learning. You know, I use the example that AI is smarter than any human because it knows about everything. It knows about economics and philosophy and all this other stuff in aggregate more than any human knows. So in some ways, it's smarter than us already. But so we need to be able to be curators of knowledge and discerners and all those stuff. We need to train that now, not later.
Yeah, it's the human element of AI. I think it's a great place to stop. I want to thank NetChoice for hosting today's panel. And thank you guys. I'm sorry we didn't have time for questions. We probably could have used 45 hours to talk about this topic, not 45 minutes. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you. Thank you.